Chapter 1. Whispers of Midian. The land, once flowing with milk and honey, was now parched with despair. The Midianites, a tribe of desert wanderers, had descended upon Israel like a relentless sandstorm, stripping the fields bare and leaving behind only ruin. With them they brought chaos, as every harvest season saw the Israelites' hard work trampled and destroyed. It wasn't just the crops. The Midianites seized livestock, leaving behind hollowed villages and a people demoralized. The Israelites, descendants of mighty ancestors who had once triumphed over great adversities, now found themselves burrowing into the mountains, seeking refuge in caves and strongholds. They were a shadow of their former glory, a people downtrodden and shackled not by chains, but by fear. As days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and months to years, the Israelites' patience wore thin. Anguish turned to desperation. "Have we not been faithful?" they lamented, their voices echoing off the walls of their mountain hideouts. "Why has the Lord turned his face from us?" Yet it was in these very caves that whispers of hope began. Quiet conversations by night, away from the prying ears of the Midianites, turned to tales of old, of their people's exodus from Egypt, of miraculous crossings and divine interventions. If the Lord had been with them before, surely he would be again. One evening, in a particularly secluded cave, a small gathering of Israelites came together. Among them was an elderly woman, her silver hair cascading down her back, her face etched with the wisdom of years and the burdens of recent times. She began to sing softly, her voice quivering but filled with conviction. It was a song of remembrance and longing, a plea for salvation. As the haunting melody wafted through the cave, others joined in, their voices intertwining in a symphony of pain, hope, and faith. The song spread from cave to cave, from heart to heart, and with it spread a renewed belief. The God of their ancestors was still their God, and he would answer their cries. Unbeknownst to them, their prayers were already being heard, and salvation was on its way in the form of an unlikely hero. But for now, their faith and unity in the face of adversity was their strength, a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. Chapter 2. The Unlikely Hero. In the small town of Ophrah, nestled within the tribe of Manasseh, Gideon worked diligently in the shadows of a winepress, trying to thresh wheat without drawing the attention of Midianite raiders. It was a tedious task, made all the more challenging by the looming threat of being caught. The ground was unsuitable, the air stifling, but it was hidden, and in those times safety was a priority. Gideon was not the kind of man songs were written about. He wasn't tall or imposing, nor did he possess the charisma of a leader. He was, by his own admission, from the weakest clan in Manasseh and the least in his family. But as Gideon would soon discover, God had a way of choosing the most unlikely candidates for the most significant tasks. Chapter 3. Angel under the Oak. In the shade of the ancient oak in Ophrah, known to many as the Tree of Wisdom, an angelic presence sat, emanating an ethereal glow. Birds perched atop the branches seemed to sing a bit more harmoniously, and the wind carried whispers of old tales and prophecies. The atmosphere was thick with expectancy. Gideon, passing nearby, felt an inexplicable pull toward the tree. His heart raced, and a sense of reverence washed over him. He approached with caution, every step feeling both ordained and terrifying. Seated beneath the oak was a figure of immense beauty and authority. His garments shimmered as though interwoven with threads of sunlight, and his eyes held depths of knowledge and kindness. "Gideon," the angel intoned, his voice like a melodious stream. "Mighty warrior, the Lord is with you." Confusion clouded Gideon's face. He had come seeking solitude and answers, not riddles. "If the Lord is truly with us," he retorted, his voice tinged with years of pent-up frustration, "why has he abandoned us to the Midianites? Where are the miraculous deeds our ancestors told us about?" The angel, with patience and a reassuring calm, responded, "Go in the might you have, and you will save Israel. It is the Lord who is sending you." A mixture of fear, disbelief, and hope wrestled within Gideon. How could he, an ordinary man from an insignificant family, be the answer to Israel's plight? "How can I save Israel?" he stammered. "My clan is the weakest, and I'm the least in my family." The angel, sensing Gideon's genuine humility and trepidation, leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Gideon's. "The Lord will be with you," he declared with unshakable confidence, "and you will strike down the Midianites as if they were but one man." In the quiet sanctity of that sacred space, a covenant was forged. An altar was built, offerings were made, and fire descended from heaven, consuming the sacrifice. The divine encounter left an indelible mark on Gideon, embedding within him a newfound purpose and destiny. The reluctant farmer from Ophrah was now on a path to becoming a legendary warrior, a beacon of hope for a nation longing for deliverance. Chapter 4. Destruction of Baal. Moonlight draped over the town of Ophrah, casting eerie shadows that danced with the rustling leaves. Whispers of rebellion tingled in the air. Gideon, armed with 10 servants, ventured under the cover of night toward a monument that symbolized oppression and idolatry, the towering altar of Baal. His heart drummed in his chest, the weight of his divine assignment pressing down on him. Gideon could hear the distant murmurs of families settling down for the night. The great altar, a stain on the heart of Israel, stood imposingly before them, a symbol of their collective apostasy. With determination, he directed his men to tear it down. They worked in a synchronized rhythm, a clandestine dance of destruction. Soon, the sacred Asherah pole, standing beside the altar, met a similar fate. By the first light of dawn, the ground where Baal's altar had stood proudly now bore witness to a new monument, an altar to the true God, constructed using the very stones of the fallen idol. Gideon sacrificed a young bull on it, the flames consuming the offering and mingling with the morning mist, symbolizing a new dawn for Israel. As Ophrah awoke, the news spread like wildfire. Disbelief and anger consumed the townspeople as they stood before the desecrated site. "Who did this?" they demanded, their voices a cacophony of rage and confusion. The truth was not hidden for long. Whispers converged into a singular echoing accusation. "Gideon, son of Joash, did this." A mob formed outside Joash's residence, their intentions clear. "Bring out your son. He must die for his sacrilege against Baal." The air was thick with tension, the threat of violence palpable. However, Joash, fortified by a newfound conviction and pride in his son's act, stood defiantly before the crowd. "Are you Baal's defenders?" he thundered. "If Baal truly is a god, let him defend himself. If Gideon is guilty, let Baal contend with him." The crowd, taken aback by Joash's audacity, slowly dispersed, murmuring amongst themselves. But in the midst of the tumult, a name arose, an appellation that would forever define Gideon's act that fateful night: Jerubbaal, meaning, "Let Baal contend against him." In that defining moment, a once-hidden farmer had declared open war against the forces of darkness, setting the stage for the epic battles to come. Gideon, no longer just the son of Joash, had become Jerubbaal, the fearless challenger of false gods. Chapter 5. The Sign of the Fleece. In the solitude of his quarters, Gideon grappled with the weight of destiny. He had defied Baal, stood up against his own townspeople, but the gravest challenge still loomed ahead, leading a beleaguered nation against a vast and merciless Midianite horde. Questions raced through his mind. Was he truly the chosen one? Could he muster the courage and faith to face such overwhelming odds? Seeking to still the tempest of his doubts, Gideon devised a plan to ascertain the Lord's intentions. He took a simple fleece of wool and placed it on the threshing floor. With a heart laden with hope and anxiety, he whispered a prayer to the heavens. "If you will save Israel through my hand, as you promised, then let dew appear only on this fleece tomorrow morning, leaving the surrounding ground dry." The first light of dawn unveiled a miraculous sight. The ground lay parched, while the fleece was drenched, heavy with droplets of dew. It was a sign, a testament to God's intent. But the seeds of doubt, stubborn and deep-rooted, held Gideon in their grip. He yearned for undeniable certainty. "Do not be angry, O Lord," he pleaded, "but allow me one more test." He proposed an inversion of the previous sign. Let the fleece remain dry and the ground be covered in dew. God, in his infinite patience, granted Gideon's request. As morning broke, the ground glistened with moisture while the fleece lay dry, untouched by the night's dew. With 2 unmistakable signs bestowed upon him, Gideon's wavering faith fortified. The Lord had shown not just his power, but also his enduring patience and understanding of human frailty. Strengthened and reassured, Gideon readied himself, for the battle drums of Midian echoed in the distance, drawing ever closer. With God's unwavering support, Gideon was poised to rally the children of Israel against the impending storm. Chapter 6. Army of the Faithful. As word spread of Gideon's divine commission, men from various tribes flocked to his banner. The plains near the spring of Harod teemed with the noise of sharpening swords, the pounding of drums, and the murmur of men preparing for battle. An army of 32,000 had assembled, filled with fervour, ready to combat the Midianite menace. But in the midst of this formidable force, Gideon harboured a nagging unease. He knew the Lord had a plan, and it wasn't merely about assembling a vast army. The Lord's voice echoed in Gideon's thoughts, piercing and clear. "You have too many men. Israel might boast against me, saying, 'My own strength has saved me.'" God's intent was unmistakable. This battle was not to be won by the might or number of warriors, but by faith and divine intervention. Gideon stepped forth, addressing the vast sea of warriors. "Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home." At this, 22,000 men, their hearts clouded by apprehension, departed. But still, 10,000 remained, their faces a mosaic of determination and faith. Yet the Lord had further tests. Leading the men to the waters of the spring, he instructed Gideon, "Observe how they drink." Many threw themselves down, greedily gulping water, while others knelt, lapping the water with their hands, ever watchful of their surroundings. Of the thousands that had set out to drink, a mere 300 lapped the water, their eyes never straying from the horizon, alert and vigilant. The Lord's voice resonated again. "With these 300 I will deliver Israel." The vast majority, though willing, were sent back. Left with only 300 warriors against an innumerable Midianite army, the odds seemed insurmountable. But Gideon's spirit did not waver. These were God's chosen, the army of the faithful. Their strength did not lie in their weapons or numbers, but in their unwavering faith and the God who stood with them. As the night approached, Gideon readied his men for the audacious plan that was to unfold. Chapter 7. Night of the Trumpets. The pitch-black canvas of the night sky was awash with stars, their light casting an ethereal glow on the Midianite camp, which sprawled out like a vast sea of tents at the valley's heart. The desert night was silent, save for the distant murmurs of Midianite guards and the occasional rustle of the wind. Unbeknownst to them, on the hills surrounding, Gideon and his chosen 300 warriors watched, poised and ready. Gideon, illuminated by the light of the torch he held, addressed his men, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Lord has given the Midianites into our hands, but remember, this battle is not ours, it is the Lord's. We are merely his instruments." He handed each man a trumpet and an empty jar with a torch inside. The unusual weapons bemused some, but trust in Gideon and the Almighty quelled any doubts. At Gideon's signal, the 300 split into 3 groups enveloping the camp. Their hearts beat loudly in the silent night, but their faith was firmer than ever. As the moon reached its zenith, Gideon gave the command, and a sudden jarring cacophony broke the stillness. 300 trumpets blared, shattering the silence. Then, in perfect unison, the jars were smashed, revealing the blazing torches beneath. A ring of fire and sound surrounded the Midianites, the din echoing off the mountains and filling the valley. "For the Lord and for Gideon!" was the battle cry that pierced the chaos. The Midianite camp erupted into panic. Disoriented by the deafening trumpets and the sudden illumination, they were consumed by fear. Mistaking their own for the enemy in the disarray, they turned on each other. Chaos reigned supreme as the vast Midianite army, which once seemed invincible, crumbled from within. Up on the hills, the Israelites watched as the hand of God sowed confusion among their oppressors. They didn't need to engage in combat, for the Lord fought for them. The power of faith, strategy, and divine intervention had prevailed over brute force. As dawn's first light painted the horizon, the remnants of the Midianite army fled, with Gideon and the Israelites in pursuit. It was clear that the tide had turned, signalling the beginning of the end for the Midianite oppression. The night of the trumpets would be recounted for generations, a testament to what faith and trust in the Almighty could achieve. Chapter 8. Victory at the break of dawn. The first glimmers of dawn painted a canvas of light and shadow over the sprawling valley. The once formidable Midianite forces were now a chaotic mass, desperately trying to regroup and flee from the unseen enemy they believed was upon them. Their shouts and cries echoed, a cacophony of fear and disarray. Gideon, standing atop a hill with the first rays of the sun illuminating his determined face, signalled his men to give chase. The Israelites, though far fewer in number, had the advantage of unity and faith, and now, momentum. They descended like a storm, with tribes from Naphtali, Asher and Manasseh joining Gideon's original 300, bolstering their strength. The Midianite generals, Oreb and Zeb, tried to rally their troops, but the morale was broken. The element of surprise, the inexplicable chaos in their ranks, and now the relentless pursuit by the Israelites, left them vulnerable and scattered. Battle cries filled the air as the Israelites engaged in skirmishes, cutting off escape routes and cornering pockets of Midianite resistance. At the fords of the Jordan, a significant confrontation occurred, with the Midianite leaders desperately trying to cross to safety. But it was here that Oreb and Zeb met their end, their fates sealed by the very river they hoped would be their salvation. Their heads were brought to Gideon as trophies of victory, symbols of the Almighty's justice. By the time the sun stood high, casting its golden glow over the land, it was clear that the battle was decisively in Israel's favour. The remnants of the Midianite army, those who had survived the night's chaos and the ensuing battle, were captured or had fled, leaving behind their riches and supplies. As the dust settled, the magnitude of the victory became clear. Israel, under the leadership of an unlikely hero, had triumphed over a vastly superior force. The day was not won by might alone, but by faith, strategy, and divine intervention. Gideon, amidst the cheers and songs of victory, took a moment to kneel and offer gratitude. The weight of leadership, the doubts, and the challenges had all culminated in this moment of divine triumph. And as the tales of the battle spread throughout Israel, so too did the legend of Gideon, the hero who, with God by his side, delivered his people from oppression at the break of dawn. Chapter 9. Pursuit of Kings. The sun was high, and the battle's frenzy had abated, but the war was not yet over. The Midianite kings Zeba and Zalmunna had escaped the initial onslaught, fleeing with a remnant of their forces towards the east. Determined to put an end to the Midianite threat once and for all, Gideon gathered his men and set out in pursuit. But this chase was not without its challenges. The weight of fatigue bore down on the Israelites. Their pursuit was relentless, days melding into nights with scarce moments of rest. Yet the fire of determination blazed within Gideon, and his spirit kept the flames alive in his weary men. As they journeyed, Gideon and his men faced additional trials. Approaching the city of Succoth, Gideon hoped to find provisions for his exhausted troops. Yet, the leaders of the city, doubting Gideon's ability to capture the Midianite kings, denied them aid, sowing seeds of resentment. Penuel, another city, mirrored Succoth's lack of hospitality, further fueling the fires of retribution in Gideon's heart. He vowed to return and teach them the price of their defiance. The trail led the Israelites to the very edges of the wilderness, where the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Here, in a surprise assault, Gideon's forces finally cornered the Midianite kings. The confrontation was swift and decisive. Zeba and Zalmunna, once proud rulers who had brought despair to Israel, now stood defeated and captured before Gideon. But the victory brought with it a weight of decision. Gideon remembered the torment the Midianites had inflicted upon his people, particularly the death of his own brothers. The king's pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears, and justice was meted out with the sword's sharp edge. Returning to Succoth and Penuel, Gideon fulfilled his promises. The cities that had once denied aid to Israel's hero were taught a painful lesson in loyalty and consequence. As Gideon and his men made their way back home, they carried not just the spoils of war but a renewed sense of unity and faith. They had seen firsthand how, under the guidance of the Almighty and a determined leader, even the mightiest foes could be vanquished. Chapter 10. A city's betrayal. Succoth, a city nestled within the Jordan's valley, bustled with life. Its inhabitants, though aware of the broader regional conflicts, remained somewhat detached, hoping the storm of war would pass them by. But as Gideon and his men approached its gates, the fate of the city became inextricably intertwined with the hero's journey. The relentless pursuit of the Midianite kings had drained the Israelite warriors, leaving them famished and fatigued. As the city's towering walls and sturdy gates loomed ahead, Gideon saw in Succoth a beacon of hope. Surely his kinsman would offer food and shelter, allowing his men a brief respite to rejuvenate. But the elders of Succoth were skeptical. They had heard tales of Gideon's daring venture against the vast Midianite army, but had yet to receive news of its outcome. To them, aligning with Gideon without certainty of his victory was too great a gamble. Would they risk the wrath of the mighty Midianites for an uncertain ally? Gideon's plea was heartfelt. "Lend us some sustenance," he implored, "so that my men may gather strength. Once our mission is complete, we promise to return in peace." But the elders, fear clouding their judgment, refused. They retorted, "Why should we provide for your army? Have you already captured the Midianite kings that you expect us to feed you?" This rejection stung Gideon deep. Not only were his men denied the aid they desperately needed, but they were also mocked in their exhaustion. Burning with indignation, Gideon's voice turned cold. "When the Lord delivers Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand," he vowed, "I will tear your flesh with the thorns and briars of the wilderness." With heavy hearts and empty stomachs, Gideon's forces moved on, their sense of betrayal overshadowing their fatigue. The memory of Succoth's refusal weighed heavily on Gideon's mind, forging a promise of retribution. Days later, with the Midianite kings defeated and the Israelites triumphant, Gideon did not forget his vow. Returning to Succoth, he captured the doubting elders. True to his word, he meted out his promised vengeance, teaching the city an unforgettable lesson about loyalty, faith, and the price of doubt. Chapter 11. The Waters of Penuel. After the bitter taste of betrayal in Succoth, Gideon and his men journeyed onward, their path leading them to Penuel, a city embraced by the shimmering curves of the Jordan River. Penuel, named after the very place where Jacob once wrestled with an angel, was a city known for its strategic location. Its bridge was a critical crossing point over the Jordan, and its waters were said to possess a tranquil beauty, reflecting the heavens by day and the stars by night. Upon reaching Penuel, Gideon hoped for a different reception than the one in Succoth. With the enemy king still at large and his men's energy waning, he approached the city's leaders with a request for sustenance. Surely, he thought, the city by the sacred waters would show kindness to their brethren. Yet, much like Succoth, the leaders of Penuel were hesitant. Fear of the Midianite reprisal, combined with skepticism about Gideon's quest, held them back. Once again, Gideon's plea for assistance was met with refusal and mockery. The leaders questioned, "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your possession, that we should give bread to your troops?" This second rejection, coming on the heels of the first, deepened the wound in Gideon's spirit. His patience, once abundant, was now wearing thin. In a voice echoing with determination and a hint of anger, he declared, "When I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower," pointing to the majestic watchtower of Penuel, the pride of the city. Leaving Penuel behind, the Israelites pressed forward, bolstered not by food or drink, but by a burning desire to see their mission to its end. The weight of the confrontations at Succoth and Penuel added a fervour to their steps, for they now fought not only against the Midianites, but also to prove their doubters wrong. True to his word, upon his victorious return, Gideon dealt with Penuel. The city's magnificent tower, once a symbol of its strength and pride, was razed to the ground. The men of the city faced Gideon's wrath, a harsh reminder of the cost of doubt and the consequences of choosing fear over faith. Chapter 12. Capturing the Crescent Moons. Beyond Penuel, the landscape stretched into an expansive vista of valleys and ridges. Gideon's pursuit became a race against time and fatigue, pushing deeper into the enemy's heartland. His target, Zebah and Zalmunna, the elusive Midianite kings whose very names whispered power and cruelty. They were the Crescent Moons, symbols of the Midianite strength, and their capture was essential for Israel's liberation. Guided by intelligence and the very hand of God, Gideon's troops stealthily advanced upon the unsuspecting Midianite encampment at Karkor. As dawn broke, with the sun casting long golden fingers across the desert sand, the Israelites struck, catching the Midianites off guard. The element of surprise, combined with their burning determination, ensured a swift and decisive victory. The camp, once buzzing with life and laughter, was now a tableau of chaos and defeat. Zeba and Zalmunna, realizing the tide had turned against them, tried to flee, their royal garments flapping behind them like distressed birds. Yet Gideon, filled with righteous fury, pursued and captured them, bringing the crescent moons to their knees. As Gideon stood before these humbled kings, he remembered his brothers, slain by these very hands. It was a moment of reckoning. The weight of the past, the sacrifices made, and the pain endured all converged in this climactic encounter. Gideon demanded, "What kind of men did you kill at Tabor?" When they described his brothers as men resembling him, like sons of a king, the personal nature of this vendetta became painfully clear. He declared that, had they spared his family, he would have spared them. However, with justice heavy in the air, the leaders met their fate at Gideon's hand. With the crescent moons captured and the Midianite threat quashed, Israel's oppressors were vanquished. The nation had not only secured their land, but had also sent a resounding message to the surrounding kingdoms. Israel, under the watchful eye of their God, was a force to be reckoned with. The crescent moons, once symbols of dread and power, now symbolized Israel's triumph over their oppressors. Gideon returned with these symbols, and more than just spoils of war, they were a testament to God's promise and power, proving that with faith even the mightiest could be felled. Chapter 13, Crown Refused. In the wake of victory, the Israelites gathered around their hero, a sense of awe and admiration palpable in the air. The battles were won, the oppressors defeated, and peace was restored to the land. The nation yearned for stability and leadership, and to them Gideon, the valiant warrior, the beacon of hope, seemed like the obvious choice. "Rule over us," they implored, their voices echoing with fervour. "You and your son and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." The proposal was tempting. To become king would mean power, influence, and a chance to solidify the nation's newfound peace and prosperity. It was the kind of offer that could turn the head of even the most steadfast. Yet Gideon, ever the humble servant, surprised all. With a firm resolve, he responded, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son. The Lord will rule over you." In that defining moment, Gideon's true character shone through. He recognized that it was not by his hand alone that victory was achieved, but by the guiding and empowering hand of God. His refusal was a powerful reminder of the unique covenant between Israel and its divine protector. While other nations sought strength in kings and emperors, Israel's true strength lay in its unwavering faith in the Almighty. Gideon's decision not only underscored God's sovereignty, but also set a precedent of humility and service that would be revered for generations. However, while Gideon declined the crown, he did make a request. He asked each man to give him a gold earring from the spoils of war. With this gold, Gideon made an ephod, a priestly garment, which he placed in his city, Ophrah. Yet this symbol of gratitude and remembrance would eventually become a snare to the Israelites, leading some to idolatry. Even in victory, the challenges of leadership were manifold. While Gideon's heart was in the right place, the ephod served as a reminder that even the best intentions could have unintended consequences. Nonetheless, under Gideon's leadership, the land enjoyed peace for 40 years. The man who had once threshed wheat in secret, fearful of the Midianites, had risen to become one of Israel's greatest judges, not by seeking power, but by humbly answering the call of God. Chapter 14, Effords Curse. The sun cast its golden glow over Ophrah, the city now resonating with an air of victory and relief. As the days of peace followed the battles, Gideon's fame grew, and so did the influence of a particular artifact that he had fashioned, the ephod. Crafted with great care from the gold earrings collected from the spoils of war, the ephod gleamed brilliantly, a testament to Israel's triumph over the Midianites. Intended as a symbol of gratitude and a reminder of God's deliverance, this priestly garment held a special place in Gideon's heart. However, as is often the case with objects of beauty and significance, the ephod soon captivated the attention of many. The Israelites, in their human frailty, began to stray from the intended purpose of the ephod. Instead of seeing it as a reminder of God's providence, they started to revere it, bestowing upon it a reverence that belonged only to God. Word spread throughout the land of this magnificent golden ephod in Ophrah, drawing people from near and far. Pilgrims and visitors would come, not to offer their thanks to God or to remember the miracles he had wrought, but to gaze upon the ephod, to touch it, and in some cases to worship it. Gideon, watching from the sidelines, grew increasingly troubled. The very object he had created to honor God had become a stumbling block. The ephod, instead of pointing people to the Almighty, had become a distraction, pulling their hearts and minds away from him. It was an irony that weighed heavily on Gideon's conscience. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. The city that had once been a beacon of faith began to resonate with whispers of idolatry. The Effords Curse had taken root. In the shadows, the enemies of Israel observed this shift with keen interest. They recognized that a nation divided in its faith was vulnerable, easier to conquer and subdue. While the immediate threat of the Midianites had been vanquished, other challenges loomed on the horizon. As the years passed and Gideon's time drew to a close, the ephod's influence persisted, serving as a somber reminder that even the most noble intentions could lead to unintended consequences. It was a lesson in vigilance, in the importance of ensuring that symbols and rituals, no matter how well-intentioned, did not overshadow the true essence of faith. Chapter 15. Days of Peace. The dust of battles past had settled, and the land of Israel entered a season of tranquility. Under the vigilant watch of Gideon, their judge, the Israelites enjoyed a respite from the tumultuous events that had so often marked their history. From the rolling hills of Ephraim to the rich plains of Manasseh, farmers once again took to their fields, cultivating crops without the looming shadow of enemy raiders. Marketplaces bustled with life, and the voices of children playing echoed through the streets. For a time it seemed that Israel had finally found its footing in the Promised Land. Gideon, despite his mighty exploits, ruled with a gentle hand. He understood that his primary role was not as a warrior, but as a shepherd to his people, guiding them towards the ways of the Lord. The decades of peace bore testimony to his effective leadership. Throughout this period, there was a clear shift in the way the Israelites lived. The tribes, which had often acted independently, now worked more cohesively, understanding the strength in unity. The lessons of their recent past, of turning away from God and facing the consequences, were still fresh in their minds. Temples echoed with prayers and songs, and the teachings of the Torah became the foundation of daily life. Gideon himself took this time to build and nurture his own family. The once hesitant and doubtful young man from the tribe of Manasseh had grown into a wise and respected leader. Children and grandchildren gathered around him, listening intently to tales of battles, miracles, and the constant guiding hand of the Lord. However, as the seasons changed and years turned to decades, complacency began to creep into the heart of the nation. With no immediate threats or challenges, some began to take their peace and prosperity for granted. The dedication to the Lord, so fervent in the wake of their deliverance from Midian, started to wane. Gideon, in his wisdom, foresaw the dangers of this complacency. He endeavored to remind the Israelites of their covenant with God, urging them to stay true to their faith. But time, as it always does, brought change. The days of peace, marked both by prosperity and the slow erosion of collective memory, would set the stage for the chapters to come in the story of Israel. For every dawn of peace is followed by challenges, and the true mettle of a nation is tested not in its victories, but in how it upholds its values in the face of comfort and complacency. Chapter 16. Shadows of Discord. As the golden hues of the setting sun cast long shadows over the land of Israel, another shadow, less tangible but equally foreboding, began to stretch across the tribes. Gideon's passing marked not just the end of a heroic era, but also the beginning of an uncertain future. The reverence for Gideon was palpable throughout Israel. People from all tribes mourned the loss of their judge, their protector. The memory of his leadership, characterized by courage, faith, and an unwavering trust in God, was still fresh in the minds of many. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the unity he had forged began to show signs of strain. Without Gideon's strong central presence, latent tensions among the tribes bubbled to the surface. The Ephraimites, recalling past slights, grew resentful, feeling that their role and significance in Israel's history were often overlooked. The men of Manasseh, proud of their heritage and Gideon's legacy, were quick to assert their dominance. Old rivalries rekindled, and whispers of discontent echoed in clandestine meetings. Gideon's many sons, particularly Abimelech, eyed leadership with ambition. While some genuinely wanted to continue their father's legacy of faithfulness to God and service to the people, others saw it as an opportunity for power and personal gain. Abimelech, fueled by a mix of ambition and a desire for recognition, began to sow seeds of discord, positioning himself as the rightful heir to Gideon's leadership. The sacred ephod, once a symbol of gratitude and dedication, became a snare. People, forgetting its original intent, began to worship it, allowing idolatry to creep back into their lives. The very thing that was meant to remind Israel of God's deliverance became an instrument pulling them away from him. The priests and spiritual leaders, observing the rise in idolatry and division, voiced their concerns. They recalled the times when Israel had turned away from God and faced dire consequences, urging the people to unite and recommit themselves to the Lord. However, the allure of power and personal vendettas, combined with the absence of a unifying threat like the Midianites, made the path to unity challenging. The foundations of the society Gideon had worked so hard to build showed cracks, hinting at the turbulent times ahead. Yet amidst the shadows of discord, there remained a faithful remnant, those who still held on to the teachings of the Torah, the memories of deliverance, and the hope of a united and prosperous Israel under God's guidance. Their resilience and faith would become crucial in the chapters of Israel's history yet to unfold. Chapter 17. Legacy of a Warrior. The plains of Israel, with their golden fields and sloping hills, whispered tales of valor and faith. Here, among these very hills and valleys, Gideon, a man of humble beginnings, had risen to become a beacon of hope for a beleaguered nation. As time went on and new challenges arose for the Israelites, many found solace in recounting the days of Gideon, the warrior judge, and reflecting on his enduring legacy. Gideon's story wasn't that of a typical hero. He wasn't chosen because he was the mightiest or the most confident. He was, in his own words, from the weakest clan in Manasseh, and the least in his family. It was precisely this humility, combined with an unwavering faith, that made him the man he became. Many recalled the days when Midianite raiders plundered their lands, casting shadows of despair across the nation. It was during these dark times that Gideon, threshing wheat discreetly to hide it from the invaders, had his life turned upside down by a divine visitation. An angel under the oak tree saw in him what many did not, a mighty warrior. As elders narrated stories to the younger generation, they spoke of Gideon's courage in tearing down the altar of Baal, of his wisdom in asking for signs through the Fleece, and his innovative strategy in defeating the vast Midianite army with just 300 men. But it wasn't just his military exploits that made him memorable. His leadership was marked by an enduring faith in God and a deep-seated desire to see his people free from oppression. His refusal of kingship spoke volumes about his character. In an era where power was sought after, Gideon's declaration, "The Lord will rule over you," was a testament to his unwavering belief in God's sovereignty. However, like all men, Gideon wasn't without flaws. The creation of the ephod, though well-intentioned, became a stumbling block for the nation. Yet it was a stark reminder that even the greatest of leaders are susceptible to missteps. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the landscape, the people of Israel couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and nostalgia. Gideon's legacy wasn't just in the battles he won, but in the faith he exhibited. His life served as a reminder that God doesn't choose the equipped, he equips the chosen. In Gideon's story, the Israelites found hope that even in their darkest hours, if they put their trust in God, they too could achieve the impossible. In the annals of Israel's history, amidst tales of kings and prophets, Gideon's legacy shone brightly. A warrior, a judge, a man of faith who answered God's call and led his people towards deliverance.